Alright, we have another interview with the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi. This man is on a whirlwind of a press tour taking the Rebirth demo to places big and small. Chances are, if you have a Comic-Con in your area, he's either been there or will be there. The man does not rest. And today is no exception. We have another interview where he talks a little bit about how they're able to take old school ideas from the OG Final Fantasy VII and now incorporate them into the remake trilogy, as well as how they're expanding on the side quests with some crazy replayability stuff that sounds absolutely bonkers, and of course, how they're trying to keep the essence of the characters from the original Final Fantasy VII alive and well in the remake trilogy. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here, you can subscribe as well. We recently crossed 1,000 subs on the channel, which I didn't think would ever happen, and it took me almost 2 years to do it, but we finally did it. So thank you to everyone who watches these videos and supports the channel and wants to come back and hear my dumbass talk about Final Fantasy stuff. It still blows my mind that people actually subscribe to come back for these videos, but thank you to everyone who still watches these videos and supports the channel. It means a lot. So getting to that interview, this one comes to us from Screen Rant, and in it, Naoki Hamaguchi gets to talk about some really interesting tidbits that he doesn't mention in other interviews. And one of the biggest ones is how they faced hardware limitations with the original Final Fantasy VII, and how those original creators had so many cool ideas that they wanted to implement, but they just couldn't because of hardware restrictions. And this is actually something we're going to touch on a little bit more in a future video I have coming out next week, so I won't harp on it too much in this video, but he gives the example of getting to the Sector 7 slums for the first time, your first time in Midgar, and how you can rotate the camera up and actually look at the plate and look all around the Sector 7 slums, and how originally the OG developers wanted to do that in original Final Fantasy VII, but because of the hardware limitations, they weren't able to do that. And he mentions how that was a really big moment that a lot of people still bring up from Remake, is looking at Midgar for the first time. And that was a really incredible experience, you know, getting to the train station for the first time, meeting Tifa, going to Seventh Heaven was all amazing. But one of the moments that sticks out to me is when Cloud goes to sleep. He wakes up the next morning, opens the door, and for the first time you see Midgar, the Sector 7 slums in the daylight, and the overworld map theme kicks in, and it's this moment where we're all just kind of taken aback because we're now getting to see this world fully realized and visualized, and maybe even how some of us viewed it as kids come to life now with all of this incredibly powerful tech that we now have. He punctuates all of this by saying, where now we are able to and provide this visual detail that then creates an alternate or new discovery for users. Hits it right on the head there. We either get to relive the stuff we saw as children or see it from a completely new angle, and it is fascinating. Up next, he talks a little bit more about those all-important bonds between the characters and how they're not just keeping them in the story, but implementing them not just in gameplay, but even the side quests. And he gives an example of you might do a quest with Cloud, Aerith, and Red XIII, but you can swap out those party members later on. But the whole main idea is that you're playing with your party members, in this case Aerith and Red XIII, and you're accomplishing your side quest, which is going to add to building the bonds between the characters. And my mind immediately goes to conversations and banter that these characters will have with each other, and I'm starting to wonder how much unique dialogue is going to be in the game, because if I can do side quests with whatever characters I want, then that means they probably recorded so many different versions of all of the dialogue for all of the side quests depending on who's in your party. So you might have banter between Cloud, Aerith, and Red XIII, but on another playthrough someone might take Barret and Tifa with them, or Red XIII and Tifa, or Barret and Red XIII. So I'm really curious to see how much unique dialogue is implemented into these side quests with the characters, but I'm also just really excited to do replayability stuff, you know? I want to hear this dialogue from all of these different characters and experience the side quests in different ways, if that's even possible. But all in all, I very much appreciate how important these character bonds are, not just to the story, but to the developers, because they could easily make this just kind of a surface level thing where the characters bond through cutscenes and that's that's it. No, they're going to incorporate all of that wonderful stuff into the gameplay, and to me, I love it. I go back to a game like Final Fantasy XV, which for all of its flaws, it does character moments and bonding and banter and incorporating all of that into the gameplay really, really well. Up next, Naoki Hamaguchi actually does something he's done in previous interviews, which I really value, and he becomes the interviewer who then interviews the interviewee, which is something you don't see a lot of people doing, but he asks a pretty interesting question by saying, if you don't mind, so seeing that there's a lot of fans of the original title, and that's why it's been loved for so long, is there something that you feel is important to keep or to see in the remake? The interviewer responds with, at the heart of it really, it's the characters that everyone is there for, I think. So as long as their essence is there and the synergy too, and how these new mechanics are playing into those characters, I think is a really interesting new way to learn about them through doing. I think the character is at the heart of it really. Hamaguchi then responds with, thank you so much for your answer. We too feel that that's a really important theme of preserving the essence of the character, which is super important to a lot of fans, and that right there honestly is why people love not just Final Fantasy VII so much, but the entire Final Fantasy franchise. Whether you love 7, or you love 8, or you love 6 or 4, the one thing that will always bring you back to those games, it's not just the gameplay, it's not just the music, it's not just the story, it's those characters that we grow to love so much. And preserving the essence of them is super important, because with Final Fantasy VII in particular, there's the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which a lot of people feel kind of lost its way when it came to the interpretation of the characters. They kind of changed a little bit after Final Fantasy VII Original going into the compilation, with Advent Children kind of being the bigger example that a lot of people give. Everyone always talks about Cloud in that movie being, really emo and depressing, and how that doesn't really match his personality of who he is at the end of OG FF7. Personally, I disagree. I actually think Cloud's characterization in Advent Children makes a lot of sense, and I did a video on that a very long time ago, so if you'd like to check that out, I'll link that in this video as well. But a character that I tend to think about is Aerith. In the OG Final Fantasy VII, she's this really fun, spunky, lighthearted, and at times serious character. And over time, especially with Advent Children, it kind of feels like they turned her into this ethereal, super serious goddess kind of a character. And I think a lot of her personality was lost. And you really see that in Advent Children. She's basically like this goddess that saves the day. But seeing how they're handling the characters in the remake trilogy just has me very comfortable, because it shows to me that they understand these characters again. They know how to write them, they know how they should act, and the voice actors are putting that into their work as well. I keep mentioning Cody Christian. He does such a fantastic job at Cloud, playing this character that's trying so hard to be cool, but he's really just a big old nerd. John Eric Bentley as Barrett, adding so much dimension to the character. Brianna as Aerith, and Britt Baron as Tifa. Everyone involved in this franchise and playing these characters, they understand their characters, and they can understand those characters because the writing is so good, and it's clear that they finally understand these characters again. Last but not least, we're going to end on a really interesting tidbit involving Red XIII and Cosmo Canyon. Hamaguchi goes on to say, a fun little tidbit that I wanted to share about this in the original, you may remember that Red XIII, if you go to Cosmo Canyon, once you go there, his personality changes a bit. And considering that his personality changes, we have it designed so that all quests in the game kind of has a Red XIII and a Nanaki version, which again, holy shit. The amount of dedication and attention to detail to these characters and how they're going to affect the side quests is bananas. And without getting into too many spoilers, obviously there is pre-Cosmo Canyon Red XIII, and then there's post-Cosmo Canyon Red XIII, and the events that he experiences at Cosmo Canyon and Cave of the Gi and finding out about his father, it changes him. He actually opens up a lot more, and he becomes a slightly different character. And he doesn't just open up, as a character, he opens up more to the party. He becomes trusting of them, and they become his adoptive family, so to speak. So to know that there are two different versions of every side quest specifically because of Red XIII and that personality change is bonkers to me. And again, that just adds to replayability, because on your second replay, you might want to see the Nanaki version of all of the side quests. You might want to see all of the Red XIII versions. So it's just insane and astounding the amount of attention to detail and love that is going into this game. And not to mention money. They're pouring so much money into this game to make it as amazing as it can possibly be, from the tech to the gameplay to the side quests to the characters. It's just absolutely nuts. So with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about some of these questions. Are you excited to see the different versions of the side quests depending on where you are with Red 13? And what do you guys think about what they're doing with the characters? Do you think that they've managed to keep the essence of the OG versions of the characters alive and well in the remake trilogy? I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video, and thank you again for the 1,000 subs. It is absolutely nuts. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.